The Legend of the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, Part 1, Chapter 7, Splinter. Written and performed by Joseph Chambers, based on the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle comic books created by Kevin Eastman and Peter Laird.
"Hi, Sensei," Leonardo responded obediently, and then he picked up the girl, hauled her over his shoulder and placed her on a red, threadbare couch. "Remember the first aid I taught you last year?" the rat added. He then directed Michelangelo. "Go back to bed, this does not concern you." Mikey had known better of answering back to Splinter after he had once refused to do the dishes when his dad had asked. He still disagreed and thought that the Batman comic he had been reading at the time was so much more important than the dishes, but when he had answered back to his father on that occasion, he had not been allowed to read any comic books for a month. So Michelangelo sulked off to his room, a little disgruntled at not being part of such an enormous occasion. The remaining turtles were physically and mentally shaking with unease. "Raphael, Donatello, you will follow me to the meditation chamber," barked the rodent sensei. He then walked towards a green door on the edge of the main room. It was covered with drawings the turtles had done as children. Some drawings showed poorly drawn interpretations of the turtles and their sensei. Others showed images of the sewers and surrounding area of the lair, and some even portrayed fictional characters from TV, video games, movies, and other media. Their father was kneeling in the centre of the room on a rug, and they mirrored him on different rugs. Raphael knelt in one corner, and Donatello similarly knelt in the opposite corner. The room itself was designed for relaxation and focus. Relaxation was key so as to conserve energy in order to use it more effectively when required. And focus was required so when you needed such energy you could channel it and effectively fight, run, climb or jump your way out of trouble. However, this was only one side of the 4-metre squared room. The other was taken up by a soft white mattress with a cover and pillows, a side table, a small tree with an artificial light above it, and a watering can beside it, along with a shelf above the bed which had several dusty artefacts on it, and finally a very old-looking closet in the corner. Minimalistic, but homely. The sensei was the first to speak. "Tonight you have broken one of the key rules that I have set out for you. I completely understand your curiosity, but you in return must understand that it was foolish and irresponsible. However, I feel that this has not only been a valuable lesson for you, but also for me." This perplexed both turtles. While this speech was being given, April had awoken with the figure of a stern-looking green boy leaning over her. "You shouldn't be here," Leonardo sneered in a menacing tone, drawing his swords for the second time that evening on the intruder. Leonardo looked like his brothers, except he had dark green eyes and a greyish-green skin tone that April thought gave him a sickly-looking and pale quality. He was not as tall as Donatello, nor as muscular as Raphael, but he had a rather large, commanding presence, and April could feel her heart in her throat from looking at his massively affronted eyes to the sharp katana swords he was wielding masterfully. The swords were long and curved with a single edge. April could not help but notice the metal soldier-like dog tag around his neck, as well as the additional bits of armour, not including the leather utility belt and elbow and knee pads that his brothers wore. The other armour consisted of blue plastic shin and shoulder pads, which were minorly chipped, slightly scratched and a little cracked in places, showing they were well used. He once again forcefully pushed his katanas to April's throat. At the same time as this, April grabbed her backpack and thrust the crowbar from within it. April was ready to bludgeon the turtle's head, whilst Leonardo was ready to slit the human's throat. When the rat mutant opened the door to the meditation chamber and saw the scene of the children threatening each other with deadly weapons.
"Oh, I see," the rat mutant said calmly.
"I must give you some lessons on how to act around other people." He directed his first sentence to Leonardo. "Lesson 1. They may get the wrong idea if you point your swords at their neck." He then turned to April. "Lesson 2. The problem is not made better by the addition of a crowbar."
April had been returned home by the rat mutant.
She had expected him to be angry at her for disturbing them. However, he had been very reasonable. He had just told April that he and his sons were living a secret life and that she could not tell anyone about it.
He had then offered to walk her home through the sewers in case she got lost. April thought he seemed rather fatherly.
Undoubtedly more fatherly than her own father at the very least. As April and the rat walked, she observed him like the fascinating specimen of a mutant that he was.
The rat was about 6'2" in height,
and had thick, dark grey fur all over his body except his hands and feet, which were a garish shade of bright pink, like that of a strawberry shake. His digits ended in long, claw-like nails. He had 3 fingers and a thumb on each hand, and 4 toes on each foot, and although they were double the length of average human toes and fingers, they separated into digits further back on his feet and hands, so his feet and hands were roughly the same size as that of a human's feet and hands. His head consisted of 2 large round pink ears and a pair of brown eyes which seemed more man than rodent. He also had a snout which ended in a pink nose and a mouth with sharp-looking teeth that somehow still created warmth and trust whenever he smiled. He had long whiskers that poured out of his snout and seemed to trail outwards in every possible direction, as if they were opposed to the notions of gravity and logic. His rope-like tail was about 1.5 metres long and the same pink as his ears, nose, fingers and toes. He was wearing an ancient-looking martial arts suit consisting of a shirt and a pair of trousers. It was a slightly lighter shade of grey than his fur, and despite being worn and torn in multiple places, was immaculately clean. It had 2 emblems sewn into the right side of the shirt. One was a green footprint, and the other was a golden letter S.
The trousers were cut with a hole in the rear to allow his tail freedom.